The clang of metal against metal echoed through the cavernous hall, drowning out the low hum of 1,000 exotic species huddled in their respective corners of the Gravitas Pinnacle Athletic Club. The gym was a coliseum of the strongest beings in the galaxy, its walls lined with holographic ads, promoting everything from extreme gravity fitness regimens to protein shakes that promised to boost your strength to near godlike levels. In the center, an enormous display screen flashed a list of upcoming gym challenges, each more ludicrous than the last, with prizes so extravagant they bordered on absurd. The pungent smell of alien sweat, burned ozone, and crushed, over-engineered equipment mingled in the air, creating a sharp tang that made every breath feel like a jolt to the senses. Dave Mallister, Earth's unassuming ambassador, walked through the gym doors, feeling like a sheep wandering into a lion's den. The moment his boots clicked on the metallic floor, every pair of alien eyes turned toward him with an unspoken sneer. He knew what they were thinking. A human here? At the Gravitas Pinnacle? The gym where only the strongest were allowed to sweat in its hallowed halls. Dave was used to being underestimated, but that didn't make the weight of their scorn any easier to bear. Tick Glack, the gym's owner and self-proclaimed quadriceps monarch, stood in the center of the weightlifting floor, flexing his massive limbs with a casual arrogance that made Dave's stomach churn. His 4 muscular arms were covered in glowing tattoos, each symbol representing an ancient battle from his species' history. His eyes, no, his entire being, seemed to radiate an energy that made him feel like a living god. His booming voice echoed through the gym, drawing attention from the rest of the crowd. "I say again!" Thaki's voice cracked the air like a thunderclap. The human musculature is a cosmic joke, weak, limp, designed for light gardening at best. Dave winced as a ripple of laughter filled the air. The sound wasn't even laughter in the usual sense. It was something deeper, darker, an alien cacophony that echoed in his bones. The mockery wasn't directed at him alone. It was as if humanity, in its entirety, had just been dismissed in a single sentence. In the corner, Dave froze, protein drink in hand. His initial hope of blending into the background was shattered the moment Thieske had spoken. His shirt, emblazoned with the words, "Earthling, please don't eat me," had been a foolish choice. The crowd's eyes now fixed on him, waiting for him to respond, waiting for him to break. They didn't expect much. After all, they were right. Humans, as far as the universe was concerned, were weak. Thak's eyes narrowed as he spotted Dave, the grin on his face widening as he approached. The crowd shifted with anticipation, their alien eyes now focused entirely on the lone human in the room. "You there," Thak barked. "Can you even lift your own body weight? Or do you use some sort of pulley system?" The gym fell silent as the question hit. Every alien in the room waited for Dave to answer, and the intensity of their stares made him feel like an insect under a magnifying glass. Dave, swallowing hard, raised an eyebrow, the drink now forgotten in his hand. His voice came out dry, but steady. "What if I can?" The crowd burst into laughter again, this time mixed with grating, mechanical wheezes, and a variety of clicking sounds. The gym had transformed into a circus, and Dave was the unwitting clown. His stomach twisted, but he could already feel the burn of something else rising within him. It was an old, familiar feeling, the heat of defiance. Thek stopped before him, towering like a mountain. His massive frame eclipsed the lights above, casting Dave into shadow. The alien flexed his 4 arms, stretching them out like an emperor displaying his superiority. "You look lost, human," Thak said, his voice rich with disdain. "Perhaps you're here to study how real species exercise, or maybe you're taking notes for Earth's inevitable submission into the Universal Weakling Registry." "Is that a real thing?" Dave asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "No," Thek admitted, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "But it should be." The crowd howled again, but this time something about it made Dave's blood run cold. He had had enough. Enough of the jeering, enough of the endless ridicule. His hands clenched at his sides as he turned his gaze back to Thek's. "All right," Dave said, setting his protein drink down. "What exactly do you want from me?" Thek's smile stretched wider, revealing a set of teeth that looked capable of cutting through steel. "A challenge," he said. "One event of your choosing. You beat me, and I will personally grant you a barrel of Blur and Black Brew." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Even Dave, who had never heard of Blur and Black Brew, could tell from the excitement in their faces that it was something special, something rare, something worth far more than the ridiculous pride Thack had on display. "A challenge?" Dave repeated, suddenly intrigued, his muscles tensing in preparation for whatever bizarre test of strength was about to be thrown at him. "Yes, Earthling," Thack said, his voice thick with mockery. "You win, you get your prize. But if you lose—" He held up a ridiculous, garish hat that looked like it belonged in a circus, not a gym. It was bright pink, with stuffed animals sewn onto it, and an inexplicable scent of onions wafting from it. "If you lose, you wear this hat of eternal shame." The Keek's voice was dripping with venomous pride as he waved the hat around. The aliens in the gym snickered at the thought of a human being forced to wear such an absurd thing. Dave stared at the hat, blinking. He felt the weight of their gaze on him, every eye scrutinizing his every move. And for the first time, Dave felt the itch of something long buried inside him. His hand tightened on the bench behind him. "Fine," Dave said, a quiet resolve settling over him. "I'll pick the challenge." Thachke blinked, clearly expecting some wild, unthinkable request. But Dave didn't give him that satisfaction. He just stared back, his voice calm but firm. "Bench pressing." There was a moment of stunned silence. Bench pressing? Of all the challenges, Thack had expected something far more complicated, something outlandish. The gym fell into a stunned hush as they all awaited Thachke's response. Dave had just picked the most basic, the simplest challenge. Thachke blinked his 5 eyes. "Just bench pressing?" Dave nodded. "Just bench pressing. Unless, of course, you're scared of a little simplicity." The crowd erupted into laughter, but Dave remained steady. Thachke's cocky grin faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty, before he snorted, "Prepare to be crushed, Earthling." The challenge had begun. Thachke's laughter roared through the gym as he gestured grandly to the glowing bench press apparatus. It wasn't just a gym machine, it was a monstrous creation of alien engineering. Dave's eyes narrowed as he sized it up. The barbell hung ominously, suspended 2 feet above the ground by some sort of anti-gravity system that made it wobble unnervingly. Pulses of green light flickered across the bar like angry fireflies, casting strange shadows on the walls. Dave could already feel the sweat beginning to bead on his forehead, the dense, metallic smell of alien perfume mingling with the overpowering odor of exertion in the room. "This," Thack said with an exaggerated flourish, "is the Quantum Lift 9000, forged in the gravity wells of Xanth. It's calibrated for maximum exertion and capable of generating resistance equivalent to a planetary mass." Dave's gut twisted at the thought of lifting something that could generate enough force to make his muscles scream in agony. He wiped his palms against his shirt. His eyes flicked to the crowd that had gathered around the bench press area. The spectators, creatures with eyes that didn't blink, some with limbs that defied logic, others with translucent skin that shimmered under the gym lights, all seemed to pulse with eager anticipation. The gym, once just an intimidating arena of ridicule, now felt like a pressure cooker. The noise of the crowd, the hum of the gym's machinery, even the faint thrum of his heartbeat all seemed to grow louder. It was as if every sound was magnified by the gravity of the situation. Thirk was undeterred by the growing tension. His voice boomed again, shaking the air around them. "You humans amuse me. You think this is a test of strength? No. This is a lesson in knowing your place." The rest of the gym fell into hushed silence as Thark slammed his fists onto the barbell's control panel, activating the machine. The entire apparatus hummed to life, and a deep mechanical groan echoed throughout the gym as the weight began to glow more intensely. Dave's hands tightened into fists as the bar swayed above him, daring him to challenge it. His heart raced, not with fear, but with a sharp, biting sense of determination. He could feel the gravity of the situation pressing down on him. Not just the machine, not just the barbell, but the eyes of the entire gym. They were watching him. They were waiting for him to fail. This wasn't just a challenge to his body, it was a challenge to his very existence, to the belief that humans were inferior. Dave stood tall, forcing his shoulders to relax, trying to dispel the pounding anxiety in his chest. The scent of alien sweat, a sharp blend of ozone and something faintly metallic, lingered in the air. His mouth was dry, but he didn't allow himself the luxury of hesitation. He wouldn't back down. Not here. Not now. "All right," Dave said, his voice a mixture of controlled calm and simmering anger. "Let's see what this thing can really do." Thick's grin spread across his face, a mixture of triumph and disdain. "This," he said, slapping the bench with a flourish, "is the weight of the cosmos itself. I will show you what true power is." His voice was a rolling thunder, a deep bass that rattled the bones. Dave lay down on the bench, feeling the cool surface against his back, his hands gripping the bar. The moment his palms made contact with the glowing metal, a jolt of heat surged through him. The weight was already overwhelming. He adjusted his position, trying to find a rhythm, but the pulsing energy of the barbell was relentless, like a storm, like a beast waiting to crush him under its weight. With a deep breath, Dave locked his arms around the barbell and, with a strained grunt, lifted it off the rack. The moment it left its resting position, the barbell felt like a ton of bricks pressing down on him. His arms trembled, the muscles in his chest and shoulders screaming in protest as the bar swayed above him, but he forced it lower, inch by inch. The crowd was dead silent now, watching him struggle. A slug-like alien in the back dropped its snack in surprise. The noise of the gym seemed to vanish, leaving only the harsh, grating sound of Dave's strained breath. He lowered the bar slowly, feeling his joints begin to protest. Sweat trickled down his forehead, stinging his eyes. His chest felt like it was being crushed under 1,000 tons of weight, but he pushed on, ignoring the voice in his head that screamed for him to quit. With a grunt of determination, he pushed the bar back up, feeling the muscles in his arms burn with every millimeter. His body shook violently, his veins standing out in stark relief against his pale skin. The bar wobbled above him, threatening to fall, but Dave didn't allow it. He locked his elbows, breathing hard through gritted teeth, until the barbell finally rested back in its rack. The gym exploded into gasps of disbelief. Dave, panting heavily, sat up, wiping the sweat from his brow, his chest heaving. His arms felt like they were made of lead, and the taste of iron filled his mouth, but a triumphant grin spread across his face. "Your turn, big guy," Dave said, his voice rasping but resolute. Thak's face twisted with annoyance, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. His forearms flexed as he approached the bench, his massive muscles rippling with power. The crowd murmured excitedly, their eyes flicking back and forth between Dave and Thak. The energy in the room had shifted, the air now thick with anticipation, thick with the expectation that Dave's victory was a fluke, and that the alien quadriceps monarch would soon put the human in his place. They grabbed the barbell effortlessly, and with the casual grace of someone inflating a balloon, he began to lift the weight with ease. His arms flexed and unflexed in a steady rhythm, the barbell rising and falling like a clockwork machine. The gym erupted in applause, the sound shaking the walls as Thike easily performed 10 flawless reps, his eyes gleaming with arrogance. Dave stood to the side, silently watching, wiping his hands on his shirt. The sweat still clung to his skin, but it didn't bother him anymore. He was already thinking ahead, calculating the next move. "Nice form," Dave said, clapping sarcastically, "but we're not done yet." Thike sneered, shaking his head with exaggerated pity. "Done? I've already won, Earthling." But Dave wasn't finished. He had one more move up his sleeve. "I think we should raise the stakes," Dave said, his voice steady, daring. "Let's add more weight." Thak's eyes flashed with a mix of disbelief and fury. "More weight?" he repeated, his voice thick with disdain. "You're delusional." "I'm not asking," Dave said, his lips curling into a faint smile. "I'm telling you. Add more weight. Let's see who's really the strongest." The room fell into an uneasy silence. The crowd was stunned, unsure whether they were watching a suicidal human or someone who was truly going to challenge the alien's pride. But Dave's eyes never left Thike's face. He wasn't going to back down. Not this time. The crowd in the gym fell deathly silent as Dave's words hung in the air, daring the towering Thuk to take the bait. Every eye in the room was fixed on the human, a species that had just done what no one thought possible. He had lifted the unliftable. But now, as the whispers and murmurs died down, the energy in the room shifted again, and the eyes of the aliens focused with a singular, intense gaze. The Quantum Lift 9000 hummed menacingly as Thake, seething with the sting of his pride being challenged, slammed his fist on the control panel. The barbell, now glowing a deep red, pulsed like a heart, as if warning them both that this was no simple game. "All right," Thache growled, his voice low and deep, reverberating through the walls. "You want more weight? You'll regret this." Dave stood, his legs a little unsteady from the strain of the last lift. Sweat streamed down his face, but his eyes, wide with determination, never left the alien. The air in the gym felt thick, oppressive, as if the very space around them was holding its breath. The strange scent of oil, metal, and alien body odor seemed to intensify, coating the back of his throat, but he pushed it aside, focusing only on the task at hand. "Bring it," Dave said flatly, his voice steady despite the weight of what he was about to face. His heart hammered in his chest like a war drum, but he knew there was no turning back. Thak had made the challenge, and now Dave had to rise to meet it. Thak's smirk was like the quiet before a storm, a promise of chaos to come. He barked a command in his strange alien tongue, and the hum of the quantum lift grew louder, the pressure building like the final moments before a thunderstrike. The barbell glowed brighter, casting an eerie light across the gym, as if the weight of the galaxy itself had just been suspended above them. The metallic smell in the air was now tinged with the tang of ozone, the bar flickering with bursts of electric blue energy, pulsing like the heartbeat of the machine itself. A nervous murmur rippled through the crowd as the weight was adjusted. Dave could hear the sharp, dissonant hum as the machine powered up again. The floor beneath his feet seemed to tremble in time with the sound, vibrating slightly under the added strain. He adjusted his grip on the barbell, feeling the cold, hard surface of the metallic rod beneath his hands. His palms were slick with sweat, his fingers aching from the effort of holding on. The air tasted metallic now, sharp and tangy, and every breath felt heavy, as though the atmosphere itself had thickened. His body was telling him to stop, to quit before it was too late. But there was no backing down. There was no escape from the arena of pride Thik had created. "Let's see how far you can really go, human," Thik said, his voice mocking as he took a step back. The bar above them began to pulse even brighter, now a furious red, its light casting a sickly glow across the faces of the aliens that had gathered to witness this moment. Dave settled onto the bench, the cool surface biting into his back as he positioned himself. He could feel every eye on him, the silent weight of judgment pressing down on him from all sides. The aliens' alien eyes, their strange appendages, their bizarre, insect-like gazes, were trained on him with a mixture of awe and disbelief. He stared up at the bar, the weight now overwhelming. It was as though the entire gym was holding its collective breath, waiting to see if the human would snap beneath the pressure. The air was charged with anticipation, thick with tension. Dave's heart raced faster, his body rebelling, his muscles already screaming in protest from the previous lifts. But there was no room for weakness, no time for doubt. He took another breath, forcing the air deep into his lungs, letting the burn of oxygen rush through his chest, preparing himself for the impossible. His eyes darted from the barbell to Thaki's face, whose grin had only grown wider, basking in the glow of his own superiority. "Just don't drop it, human," Thak taunted, his voice a gravelly laugh, tinged with the smugness of a predator anticipating victory. With a grim determination, Dave gripped the barbell, his hands trembling slightly as his fingers wrapped around the glowing metal. A low hum emanated from it, vibrating in his fingertips, almost as if the machine was alive, responding to his touch. He could feel the energy coursing through it, an unnatural pulse that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. The sound of the gym was muted, like the world was holding its breath. The audience, once full of brash taunts, had grown eerily quiet, sensing the magnitude of the moment. "Here we go," Dave muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The bar hovered slightly above him, its weight pressing down on his arms like an anchor. For a moment, he felt like he might not be able to lift it, but then his muscles locked, his entire body tensing as he lifted the barbell off the rack. The pressure hit him like a truck, the weight almost unbearable, pulling him downward, as if gravity itself had intensified. His arms shook violently, his body trembling under the effort as he slowly lowered the bar, inch by inch. The crowd's breath caught in unison. No one had ever attempted this before. The gym felt like it was holding its collective breath as Dave pushed the bar toward his chest, struggling to maintain control. The hum of the bar seemed to grow louder, more pronounced, reverberating through his body. His chest felt tight, his lungs burning as the weight pressed down. Every muscle screamed in agony, and for a moment Dave thought he might fail. But then something inside him clicked. A primal instinct, a surge of willpower that came from deep within, pushed him forward. He let out a guttural roar, one that echoed through the gym, and with sheer force of will, he pushed the bar back up, his arms trembling as he locked his elbows. The bar wobbled violently, but he held on. With a final grunt, he racked the barbell back into place, panting heavily. His arms burned like fire, his body felt like it was made of lead, but a small smile tugged at the corners of his lips. He had done it. The room erupted into disbelief. The crowd stared in stunned silence, their gazes flickering between Dave and Thik. There was no applause, no cheers, just stunned faces. Thik's expression faltered. For the first time, he looked less certain, less smug. His many eyes narrowed, and the arrogant grin faltered. But his pride wouldn't let him show weakness. "Impressive," Thak said, his voice low. "But let's see if you can keep up." Dave didn't respond immediately. Instead, he wiped the sweat from his forehead and leaned back, feeling the rush of adrenaline coursing through his body. His chest heaved with the effort, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part was still ahead. He had just thrown the gauntlet, and now he had to make sure that Thrak would understand why humans, despite all their perceived weaknesses, had something that no alien could ever quite grasp: the ability to defy the impossible. And that was just the beginning. The gym's atmosphere was thick with tension as Dave leaned back on the bench, his chest heaving, every breath ragged. His hands were slick with sweat, and the taste of metal lingered on his tongue. The entire room was still, the weight of Dave's feet hanging over them like a storm cloud waiting to burst. The Quantum Lift 9000 hummed menacingly above, its green glow still pulsing like an ominous heartbeat. The K's expression was unreadable. For a moment, Dave thought he saw a flicker of hesitation, but it was quickly replaced by a mask of arrogance, his 5 eyes narrowing with renewed determination. The crowd of aliens, so sure of their strength and superiority, watched silently, their breaths barely perceptible in the tense silence. Thak shifted, stepping forward, the sound of his 4 heavy feet thudding against the floor sending a wave of vibration through the room. The gym's walls, once silent, seemed to hum with the collective anticipation of the impending challenge. His muscles flexed, his massive frame towering over Dave, casting a long shadow over the bench. His presence was as imposing as the weight he had just dared to lift. "You've impressed me," Thak said, his voice low, carrying the weight of pride. "But let's see if you can handle the real challenge." His words sent a ripple of murmurs through the crowd. There was something in the air, a shift, as if they were all waiting for this moment to unfold. Dave wiped the sweat from his brow, forcing his arms to move despite the shaking muscles. His body was sore, every inch of him aching from the strain, but there was no stopping now. If he hesitated, he would lose everything. He had already laid the challenge, and now he had to prove that humans had more than brute strength. They had heart, strategy, and adaptability. He stood, eyes locked on Thak, his voice steady despite the exhaustion. "All right, bring it on. I'm ready for whatever you throw at me." Thak's laugh, deep and rumbling, filled the gym. Very well. You'll regret this. He turned toward the Quantum Lift 9000, his massive arms waving in an elaborate gesture. A command was barked, and the machine hummed louder, the atmosphere in the gym growing heavier with every passing second. The crowd's excitement was palpable, the sound of their breaths catching as the barbell's glow intensified, becoming a fierce crimson. Dave could feel the heat radiating from it, the air in the gym growing warmer, more charged. He could taste the metallic tang of ozone in the air as the tension built. Dave knew that this wasn't just about raw strength anymore. This was about more than just lifting a weight. It was about strategy, precision, and the ability to read the room. Thicke had been so sure of himself, but now Dave had the upper hand. He wasn't just a human trying to prove himself. He was a strategist who understood the importance of timing, focus, and pushing past limits. "All right," Dave muttered under his breath, adjusting his stance. "Let's play the game." The gym was dead silent again as Thicke, with his prideful smirk, cranked the quantum lift to its next level. The air vibrated with energy, and the floor beneath Dave's feet trembled as the weight increased exponentially. The machine groaned with a mechanical intensity, the lights overhead flickering as the machine hummed in protest. It was as if the entire building was holding its breath in anticipation. The first stage of the challenge was over. Now the real test began. Dave could feel the sweat beading on his forehead, trickling down into his eyes, blurring his vision for a moment. His body screamed in protest, but he locked his gaze onto Thicke, the alien's smug grin only pushing him further. He wasn't going to back down, not now. As the quantum lift hummed louder, Dave could feel the weight shifting, pressing harder on him, almost as if the gravity in the room had doubled. His arms began to tremble under the strain, the pressure on his chest growing more intense with every second. He could hear his heart thundering in his ears, the blood rushing in his veins, a roar of noise surrounding him despite the eerie stillness in the room. Thicke's eyes gleamed with sadistic pleasure. "Go on, human. Show me what you've got." Taking a deep breath, Dave gritted his teeth and gripped the barbell again. His fingers burned as he wrapped them around the cold, unforgiving metal, his palms slipping slightly with the sweat. The barbell, now a crimson glow, vibrated beneath his touch as if alive, mocking him, daring him to fail. The weight was crushing. Every inch of him wanted to let go, to release the bar and let the weight fall. But Dave refused to let that happen. He had to push past the limits of his body, beyond what he thought was possible. He locked his legs, planted them firmly on the ground, and focused on the task at hand. With a growl, he lifted the barbell off the rack. The weight felt like a mountain, pressing down on his chest, the pressure unbearable. But Dave kept his focus, his arms trembling but holding steady. The room was so still, every alien watching, holding their breath. Dave lowered the bar, inch by inch, his chest burning from the effort. He could feel the strain in his muscles, the fatigue setting in. His arms felt like they were on fire, his body screaming, but he didn't stop. With one final push, he locked his elbows and pressed the bar back up. The room seemed to explode into noise as the barbell wobbled, but Dave held on. 2 reps, he panted, his voice barely audible but steady. "Your turn." The Thicke's expression twisted, no longer the confident predator, but something more dangerous, something fueled by anger and humiliation. His pride had been struck, and now he would do whatever it took to regain control. With a growl, Thicke stepped forward again, cracking his neck. The room's energy shifted again as he took his place at the bench. The quantum lift hummed menacingly as Thicke lay back, the barbell above him trembling as he gripped it with ease. The crowd fell silent, waiting for Thicke to reclaim his dominance. But Dave could see the sweat on Thicke's brow, the slight tremor in his arms as he prepared for the next lift. Thicke's muscles flexed as he pushed the barbell up with ease. But there was something different in the way he did it. He was no longer the indomitable force he had once been. He was pushing harder now, trying to regain the confidence that had slipped away from him. Dave could hear the growls of frustration coming from Thicke, the sound echoing in his throat as he fought to keep control of the barbell. It was clear that the tables were turning, and Dave could almost taste the satisfaction of it. Thicke completed 10 flawless reps, but Dave wasn't impressed. He wasn't backing down. As Theke racked the barbell with a satisfied grunt, Dave pushed himself up from the bench. He was exhausted. His entire body felt like it was going to break, but he couldn't stop now. The next move was his. Theke was waiting, eager for the next round. His pride was on the line, and Dave was going to take every ounce of advantage he had. "Let's raise the stakes," Dave said, his voice steady. "Let's see if you can handle more." The gym's silence thickened as all eyes turned to the two of them. The challenge had been issued, and now it would be up to each of them to prove who had the real strength to survive. The room was dead silent, the atmosphere heavy with anticipation. The energy had shifted. No longer was it just a contest of strength, but a battle of wills. Dave could feel the eyes of the entire gym on him, the weight of their expectations pressing down like the barbell itself. His arms were sore, his body trembling from the strain of what he'd already lifted, but there was no turning back now. He had made his move, and now Thak, the self-proclaimed king of strength, had no choice but to respond. Thak's arrogance had faltered, his confidence cracked. The once proud alien's muscles rippling beneath his skin, flexed with an energy that could shatter worlds. But even he knew, this wasn't just about physical strength. This was about something deeper. The collective pride of an entire species had been shaken, and that made him dangerous. But Dave wasn't afraid. The human spirit was resilient in ways the aliens could never truly comprehend. They underestimated it, just as they had underestimated him. "You want to raise the stakes, human?" the K sneered, his voice thick with both pride and something darker. "Fine, but you won't survive it." Dave stood tall, his breath steady despite the pounding of his heart. The faint, acrid scent of alien sweat filled the air, and the hum of the Quantum Lift 9000 seemed to vibrate through his bones. He wiped his hands on his sweat-drenched shirt and glanced at the barbell. The weight had increased again, now to a level that no one had ever dared to attempt. He could feel the weight of the entire gym's disbelief pressing on him, but that only made him stronger. "Bring it on," Dave said, his voice low but carrying the weight of a challenge that had been long coming. The crowd fell deathly silent, the collective breaths of 1,000 aliens held in suspense. No human had ever attempted the impossible here. No one had ever faced the weight of the cosmos and lived to tell the tale. But Dave Mallister wasn't like the others. He wasn't here to merely survive. He was here to prove something. Thak let out a rumbling laugh that echoed through the gym. "You're mad, human, but I'll indulge you." He turned to the control panel, his clawed hands gripping it with a sense of finality. The gym's lights dimmed slightly as the machine hummed louder, its ominous power filling the space. The barbell above them began to glow with an intensity that seemed to bend reality. The weight was now approaching the impossible. "You know the rules, human," Thak said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "This is your last chance. Fail, and you'll wear the hat of eternal shame forever." Dave didn't flinch. The words didn't have the same sting they once did. He had already accepted the consequences. There was only one way out now: to conquer the weight, to show them all that humanity was capable of more than they could ever imagine. With a sharp exhale, Dave lay back on the bench, feeling the coolness of the metal beneath him. The room seemed to close in around him, the noise of the crowd fading to a distant hum. It was just him, the barbell, and the challenge ahead. He gripped the bar, the cold, glowing metal slick with sweat, and locked his hands around it. His breath was slow and deliberate as he braced himself. Thichke's eyes narrowed as he watched Dave prepare. There was no mocking, no jeering, just a quiet tension that seemed to rise with each passing second. The atmosphere had changed again. This wasn't a battle for entertainment anymore. This was the reckoning. The first pull came slow, agonizingly slow, as Dave lifted the barbell off the rack. His arms screamed with protest, the weight pressing down on his chest like the force of a planet. But he didn't stop. He didn't give in. The crowd gasped. The silence that followed was deafening, filled only by the sound of Dave's strained breathing. His face contorted with effort, sweat dripping into his eyes, his body trembling under the immense pressure. For a moment he thought he might collapse, but then the thought of what was at stake, The pride of humanity, his own pride, the strength he had always known was there, pushed him forward. His arms quivered, but they held steady. The weight continued to press down, but Dave had found his rhythm. Inch by inch, his arms began to extend. The barbell rose, trembling, but it rose. And then, with a final resounding effort, Dave locked his arms into place. He had done it. The gym erupted into chaos. Aliens from all walks of life screamed in disbelief, their cheers mixed with gasps of astonishment. Dave sat up, his vision swimming from the exertion, his muscles trembling from the strain. He had just done the impossible. Thak stood frozen, his massive body rigid with shock. His pride had been shattered. The words were caught in his throat, his 5 eyes blinking rapidly as if the reality of the situation hadn't fully registered. For a moment the gym was silent. The hum of the Quantum Lift 9000 faded into the background, leaving only the sound of heavy breathing and the distant, muffled chatter of the crowd. Dave turned to face Thak, a faint smile on his lips. "Guess you underestimated us, huh?" His voice was steady, but there was a sharp edge to it now, an edge that had been earned through every ounce of effort, every drop of sweat. Thak's expression twisted, his pride crumbling into a deep, gnawing rage. He had never expected this, never thought it possible. But Dave had shown him what humanity was truly capable of, what the galaxies had failed to recognize for so long. "You," Thak growled, his voice low and dangerous, "this isn't over." But Dave wasn't listening. He wasn't interested in Thaki's threats anymore. He had already won. In the eyes of every alien in that gym, humanity had risen above. Dave stood, wiping the sweat from his face, and turned to the crowd. His body ached, every muscle screaming, but there was a satisfaction that no physical pain could touch. "Looks like the human spirit can't be crushed," he said, his voice filled with a quiet triumph. The crowd, still in shock, began to murmur, the disbelief turning into respect. Aliens who had once mocked him were now looking at him with awe. Thak stood at the bench, glaring at Dave, his pride fractured beyond repair. The Quantum Lift 9000 hummed ominously, its once powerful presence now a shadow of its former glory. Thak had pushed every limit, and still, he had been bested. Dave picked up the glowing barrel of Blore and Black Brew, the prize he had won. He nodded to the crowd, his eyes gleaming with the same fire that had fueled him through this entire ordeal. "I'm done here," he said simply, a small grin creeping onto his face. "But if any of you want to keep testing your strength, I'm always up for a challenge." The gym was silent for a moment before the applause began. The roar of approval was deafening, and for the first time in the history of Trath 7, a human had not only survived the impossible, but had crushed it with a single, unrelenting display of strength. And as Dave walked out of the gym, the cheers of the crowd ringing in his ears, he knew one thing for sure. Humanity had just proven its place in the stars, not as the weak, insignificant species that the galaxy had once believed, but as a force to be reckoned with.